a second round of questioning and do the same process between Republicans and Democrats for 5 minutes. I'd like to highlight the fact that I think I finally agree with one of my colleagues on the control of the border. When my colleague from New York mentioned that the cartels do in fact have control of the border, I do agree with that statement. They do have control of the border. And I'd also like to remind my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that Operation Fast and Furious under the Obama-Biden administration put hundreds of thousands of weapons into Mexico. And two of those weapons actually were found at the crime scene where U.S. Border Patrol agent Brian Terry was murdered. So maybe this narrative that we need to turn our Border Patrol northward to protect Mexico from U.S. weapons, maybe we should just take a deep breath and protect the United States from the illegal and illicit activities that are entering our country. I'd like to focus your attention on this chart. On the bottom rung is the year 2020, and then it goes 21, 22, and 23. These are in pounds of drugs, illicit drug seizure by weight, every single year from 2020 in red to 2021 in gray, 2022 in blue. Mr. Urban, with your 25 plus years in DEA, why do we see a doubling, tripling of the amount of drug seizures here in the United States that are coming from Mexico? I mean, is this success here, or is this actually an indicator of failed policies?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to comment on the policy aspect in terms of, it's obviously an indication of more drugs coming across the border and more seizures. That's the way I look at it. So to some degree, there is some success there if you're seizing the drugs. With the amount of drugs coming over and the amount of deaths associated with overdoses or murder for taking pills that are laced with fentanyl, that's not success.
That's not success, I agree. So what are the policies that need to be implemented to prevent the hundreds of thousands of deaths?
It's obviously a broad question. I think the first component to that is there needs to be a joint cooperative relationship with Mexico in some way where you can action law enforcement or the military down there against the cartels. For us to disrupt the Mexican cartels, we have to start down there. That's, again, a broad issue. It's a State Department issue. It's a negotiated issue, but that's something that would have to happen to disrupt their capabilities. In terms of the homeland, I think, again, what I talked about earlier was data, right? We need data analytics to leverage data for insight for law enforcement against the Mexican cartels and Chinese money launderers.
Yeah. You have all mentioned working with the Mexican government. Mr. Farah, do you see this administration doing anything to have accountability or relationships with the Mexican government to push back?
I think the relationship with, with Mexico as well as Colombia and many other countries is much more fraught than it was previously. I think we have fewer and fewer interlocutors that can be trusted that we can deal with. I think, as I talked about, the criminalized state structure emerging as different governments, I think the AMLO government in Mexico is certainly moving in this direction, have become more allied on a strategic level with cartels than with the United States and other groups, as I think Colombia will do under President Petro, and as we've seen in Venezuela, and we've seen in Nicaragua, that you're facing an outlook where you have fewer levers because we have over time allowed those relationships, and I'm not saying that, I think goes back a decade at least, those relationships to deteriorate, and we have not been successful in engaging in ongoing training because the units we train and work with are consistently dismantled by when different governments come in that are more allied with the criminal groups. So you have well-trained, well-meaning people who are then dispersed to the wind. And I think that has made it more and more difficult over time to engage people who want to talk with us because they're not going to last in their own structures, and for us to have people we can talk to down there.
Thank you. Look at one of the agreements that we had from 2016, or really 2017 to 2020, and that was the Migrant Protection Protocols, MPP, otherwise known as Remain in Mexico. And I can't help but draw a distinction between the numbers that we're seeing here in 2020 and a policy like that does limit the amount of malign activity that a cartel can do, that they can use people. And I have been to the border a dozen times. I've seen the destruction. I've seen what Ms. Ford Maldonado has described, the assaults, the sexual assaults, the amount of money that they're charging. Ms. Ford Maldonado, what do you think about a reinstatement and an actual implementation from this administration of MPP, Remain in Mexico? Would that have an effect on the amount of drugs that we're seeing coming in this country?
I think it's possible. I think it would definitely have an effect on what's happening at the border. I think we also need to explore new avenues as to how we can secure the border and how we can stop the inhumane things that are happening. You were just saying, we've also heard stories from Border Patrol who have interviewed little girls who were raped multiple times on their journey to Mexico. Little girls that came across with the morning after pill because their parents sent them across expecting them to be assaulted on their journey. So I think something needs to be done, not just because of what's happening at the border, but what's happening beyond the border. I mean, fentanyl is affecting absolutely everyone. I think that the most recent numbers we've seen is 107,000 people that were killed in the year ending in January 2022. That's 9,000 people every 30 days. That is the equivalent of a fully loaded 747 crashing into a mountain every single day of people that are dying because of
Tragic.
this.
And thank you for your testimony. My time has expired. I recognize the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Magaziner.
Thank you.